dinosaurs changed over a long period of time. And so the dinosaurs that you'll have in the Chile Formation are completely different. It's hard to imagine. It's hard to even comprehend.
I know. That's why I don't think dinosaurs are real. This is the Exploring the National Parks podcast with Dirt in My Shoes. My name is Ash, and I'm a former park ranger and the founder of Dirt in My Shoes. I think that the parks are best seen from the trail, and I'm here to make national park trip planning easy.
And I'm John. I carry the kids on the trails, I tell stories, and notice all the things that Ash doesn't care about much, like trees.
Join us as we show you around America's spectacular national parks.
We're sharing our favorite places, fun facts, adventures, and misadventures.
And we'll even throw in a little trip planning.
Let's start exploring.
This winter, our family finally became true Utahns.
Yes.
It's about time, because we've lived in Utah for a long time.
It's embarrassing to tell people that we're from Utah and we didn't ski.
We didn't know how to ski. So this winter, we all learned how to ski. Well, actually, I learned how to ski last winter, but I allowed John and the boys to start coming this winter, thinking that, I have a whole year on you, so I'll be able to help you and put my newly acquired skills to use. And that lasted for about 10 minutes before the rest of the family just started zooming down the hill in front of me.
Hey, your expertise was really important to that process.
I was so disappointed. It was like, I put in a whole extra season and everyone in my family can ski better than me now.
No, I don't think that's technically true. I think that you have some of the skills that we don't, and we're just dumb enough and brave enough to go down the hill without those skills.
I'm sure I'm not the only one who does this, but I get in my head pretty hardcore. And I really had to work to push myself out of my comfort zone and to make myself do things even when I feel really scared to do it. And that's kind of what skiing has always been for me. It's something I've wanted to do for a long time, but I don't know, I just never felt like I had the strength,
the intestinal fortitude
to try and to make myself do it. But I have to say, as a mother, it is infinitely more scary to watch my 7-year-old go down a big hill on skis than to make myself do it.
Right.
And so that's been a new thing I've been trying to figure out is okay, I guess you just go and we hope you don't slide off. I don't know.
Our kids told me during our first or second lesson that we had that they had a really good strategy. If they couldn't stop, they would just fall down. Which brings me to one of my favorite movies from the 80s. It's a cult classic. It's Better Off Dead with John Cusack. And it's a skiing movie. One of the main themes through the whole thing is skiing. And it's so funny. And one of John Cusack's friends wants to give him a pep talk before the big race, down the mountain. And he says, listen, go that way really fast. And if anything gets in your way, turn.
That is kind of how it feels.
It's so good. And everybody from the state of Northern California was there to watch. So, which is great.
Oh my gosh. So that's been our winter. It's been a good winter. But our family, we finally are let's go skiing today. We're a Utah family now.
Yeah.
And I think we're all addicted.
We finally made it.
We did. It only took a really long time, but
I know.
We did it before 40.
We did.
Barely.
How long before 40, Ash?
I'm not going to say.
It's further for you than it is for me.
I know. It's really close for you. So anyway, really fun winter. Just learning a new skill. I have been trying to master my mental roadblocks that get in my way sometimes, and skiing has been a really cool way to do that.
I will say that the hardest part of skiing, honestly, is getting on the magic carpet for me. That is the hardest part of skiing.
John's embarrassed himself a few times.
I have
on the magic carpet for the children.
Yes. I have a story that I will tell eventually, that I will tell in conjunction with another story from a recent Bryce Canyon trip. That way we can pick on both of us at the same time.
Sounds good. Let's jump in. Some people are like, please stop talking. We want to hear about Canyonlands. I get it. But you get us and Canyonlands.
Yeah.
So we're ready to talk about Canyonlands now. And we're jumping into the fun facts today, which is John's masterpiece. I'm sure this episode is going to be great because Canyonlands is his favorite Utah park. He will sing Canyonlands praises forevermore.
From the rooftops. I will sing its praises from the rooftops.
So I'm really excited actually to jump in on this. I'm sure there's a lot that I don't know or that we don't know, even though we do love this park so much. Mm-hmm. But as we said in the exploring episode, like a lot of people overlook Canyonlands completely.
Correct.
They'll go to Moab, they'll go to Arches, and then it's like, if we have time, we'll pop into Canyonlands for a minute or something, and it really does get overlooked.
Well, it's also, when we get to fun fact number 5 and we discuss some of the human history of Canyonlands, that was from the very beginning, too. And
really?
So, it's people so interesting.
They saw Arches and were like, well, can't beat this. But today we are going to convince you that it's at least equal, if not better.
Yes. And
can we say that?
I think so. I think that we can claim that it's at least equal.
Yeah.
That's a safe claim.
John will claim it's better because he's always felt that way.
Yes.
You just love Canyonlands.
Oh my gosh,
but,
it's so good.
It seems kind of like blasphemy because Arches is really cool. But here we go. Okay. Let's convince people that Canyonlands is at least equal to Arches.
Okay, well that brings up something that was kind of stressful at the beginning of preparing for this, because as I was getting ready for today's episode, it was an interesting challenge because I've never had to do the fun facts for two parks that have been so close together.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And so if you were to draw on a map like a straight line from Arches to Canyonlands, it'd be like 15 to 20 miles tops.
Yeah.
They're like right across the street from each other, basically. And so in my mind, my initial thought was like, holy cow, how do I keep these fun facts from being the exact same as Arches National Parks? Because, I mean, a lot of the natural features are the same. A lot of the plants and animals are the same. There's a lot of different aspects to the human history for sure. But like, I was pretty concerned that a lot of the core information would be exactly the same.
Right.
Luckily, I was wrong. So even though they're across the street from each other, it's totally different.
Ooh, I'm excited.
And I'm so excited. Because this is what I discovered. I wanted to figure out what I'd done for fun facts for Arches, but also some of the other fun facts episodes, like what did we talk about in some of the other national parks that were in the area. And as I was looking through the fun facts, I realized that there was a pretty big plot hole.
Okay.
Basically, like when you are watching a movie and you realize that there's a plot hole. Well,
I watch a lot of Hallmark movies, so yes.
Yes, exactly.
I have a lot of experience with plot holes.
Yes. For Ash, it's the Hallmark romantic comedies. For me, it's like when I'm watching any sci-fi movie that has like a multiverse.
Yeah.
Or anything with like time travel. I just have to roll my eyes and grit my teeth through it, Same thing with Hallmark. Like, there's no way they would have gone on that first date. Anyways, I hate to do this to Harry Potter, but I have to because it's just so funny. One of my favorite memes from Harry Potter that exposes one of these plot holes, for me at least. There's this image. It's a picture of Dumbledore and he's talking to Harry Potter. And Dumbledore says to him, "I'm sorry about your parents, Harry, but no spell can reawaken the dead. I trust you know that. Except for the time turner. We'll use that to save Buckbeak."
Right.
It's just like, I feel like there's so many problems we could have solved if we just went back in time and put he who shall not be named in jail or something like that. Took away his wand or left him in the orphanage. Lots of things could have been changed. But anyways, I was looking over the fun facts from a lot of these other national parks and realized that there was a massive plot hole, and I'm so excited. Not only for today's episode, the Canyonlands fun facts, and its sequel, the Capitol Reef fun facts episode, when we get to it, are going to fill in the rest of the story.
Okay.
And I'm really pumped about it. And so let's jump to fun fact number 1, which will introduce us to the plot hole that I found. Fun fact number 1, is that Canyonlands National Park is located near the heart of the Colorado Plateau, which is a unique area that outside of Washington, D.C., has the highest concentration of parklands in the United States, with a higher density of national parks, monuments, historic sites, recreation areas, state parks, national forests, BLM lands than anywhere else in the country.
That's pretty much the whole Colorado Plateau. As you're naming that off, I'm like, that's true. Do people even live there? Not really.
I know. Very small communities here and there. But notably, it has 9 national parks, at least 16 monuments and historic sites, 3 recreation areas, and that's like all just federal stuff. Mm-hmm. And so that's the huge plot hole that I found in the fun facts is the Colorado Plateau. We've talked a lot about the Grand Staircase,
right?
But not what's underneath it, which is the Colorado Plateau. But I do love how, and I had to put this in the fun fact just because I thought it was funny. In the fun fact, it says outside of Washington, D.C. Right. And so I love how the NPS is always afraid to make definitive claims about things, even if it knows that it's true and that it's super cool. Because I think the NPS is kind of like the Jedi. They believe that only Sith deal in absolutes.
I would say that's true. Well, and that is funny because I'm like, I mean, I guess if you count every building that's run by the NPS in Washington, D.C., it might be more.
Right. But it's like they always have to find out a way to give themselves just a little bit of wiggle room.
They never say definitively, this place has the most stuff.
Right. It's like Death Valley is probably the hottest place on Earth.
It's true. It does say that too.
I know. Or evidence suggests that Kilauea is the most active volcano on Earth. But there could be other evidence that disproves that, you know? It's so fun. They always have like a mush word, you know, to give them a little bit of a way out in case they paint themselves into a corner. But yeah, I just thought it was so funny because Washington, D.C., like the whole idea of Washington, D.C. is that the whole thing is federal land in the first place.
Right.
Plus it has some monuments and museums and things. But comparing like Washington, D.C., which is 68 square miles, to the Colorado Plateau, which is 130,000 square miles, seems a little bit like an apples to oranges comparison to me.
Oh, that's funny.
Especially since most of the national parks in the Colorado Plateau are larger than Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
So I just thought that was super funny. But anyways, back to the Colorado Plateau.
We like to pick on the NPS.
they're fun. It's because it feels like we're picking on our own team.
Yeah.
You can do that.
It's friendly.
Yeah, it's definitely friendly.
I've still got lots of friends in there that I like. But
a friendly elbow here and there in the ribs just to keep things lively. Okay, so the Colorado Plateau, if you aren't aware, it encompasses most of Utah and large sections of Colorado, New Mexico, and Arizona. And like I said, Canyonlands is right near the heart of it. But Ash, tell me about the Colorado Plateau, and for extra points, can you name all of the 9 national parks within its boundaries?
Why would I know about the Colorado Plateau? I just know where it is.
Okay.
So I'm going to skip that. You said 9 national parks?
Right.
So that's basically like the Grand Circle, I'm guessing. So all 5 Utah.
Okay.
And then Mesa Verde, Grand Canyon.
Okay, 7.
Petrified Forest.
8.
And Great Sand Dunes.
Ooh,
no,
sorry.
Dang it.
And
I thought that one was too far out. Okay, give me another chance. Wait.
That's not how this game
Wait, there's
works.
no other one? New Mexico doesn't have one up there.
Black Canyon.
Oh, that's higher than I was thinking.
Yeah.
Oh.
Because it goes up towards
That's true, up towards Grand Junction.
Yes, exactly.
Oh, see, I went into Colorado. I just went in the wrong direction.
Correct. You went further east.
Yeah.
But yeah, so you've got all the Mighty 5, Grand Canyon, Petrified Forest, so just south into Arizona, and then you've got the west side of Colorado.
Okay, that makes sense.
And so a lot of lists will tell you there are 10 national parks, but that's because they include Chaco Canyon National Historic Park.
Park?
Yeah.
That one has a weird name.
It does.
It's like Chaco Culture National Historic Site or something.
Yeah, I think it's Chaco Culture National Historic Park.
Whatever it's called, it's worth visiting. But
yes.
Yeah, every time we go there, I'm like, we just call it Chaco Canyon.
Yes. National parks, no other words included.
Yeah.
Those are the actual national parks. So it's an amazingly beautiful place. And it's some of our favorite places to visit are within the Colorado Plateau, within these different national parks. There's so much to see. But there is so much going on. But I think understanding a few key points about the Colorado Plateau will really, you can go there without knowing much about it, which has been most of our life. And we've absolutely loved our adventures in Canyonlands and throughout the Colorado Plateau. But I feel like these next few minutes might help you like appreciate what's under your feet a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
And so it gives you a big picture. Now, Ash, another gotcha question.
Yeah, I love these. Thank you for so many.
I know. What happens when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object? What's your opinion?
It crashes.
Does one win? Does one lose? Are you sure?
Nope, I don't know.
It's kind of an interesting metaphysical question, right?
Like, I don't know. They just crash together and something goes up or something goes down or something.
I know. Well, it's one of those age-old questions like, who will win? You know, Batman versus the Joker, good versus evil, order versus chaos, deep dish versus New York style thin crust. Ancient questions that nobody has the answer to.
Thin crust. Batman. I'm going
nice.
through all.
I know. I love it. I love that you're so firm in your resolve on some of those questions. But I thought before this that an unstoppable force would win. But after learning about the Colorado Plateau, I'm pretty sure it's the immovable object that would win, in my opinion, because I've never been so impressed by a piece of land. It was put under the same pressure as the land that became the Rocky Mountains, but it didn't become the mountains. It was put under the same amount of stress that stretched Nevada to twice its normal width, yet it remains the same. The Colorado Plateau has stood up to more tectonic stress than any place I've ever studied, and at its core is still mostly unchanged. What is it, and where did it come from? To quickly summarize, it's a giant chunk of land that has been pushed, pulled, and raised up like the Rockies without undergoing major structural change.
Right, like no buckling to make mountains, because it's flat.
Right.
It's quite flat.
Yes. The story of the Colorado Plateau, especially when it comes to Canyonlands National Park over the past few 100 million years, has been deposition. Deposition is like when you just are laying down layers and layers of earth. And so the area of Canyonlands and the greater Colorado Plateau has spent hundreds of millions of years building up layer upon layer of sedimentary rock. This area has spent eons of time at the bottom of the ocean and had rivers and currents drop layers of sand onto it. Then it spent eons of time basically at sea level, where it had mud and silt deposited on top of it. And then it spent millions and millions of years as part of a vast sand desert, where even more layers of sand dunes were deposited on top of all the other layers, and then everything became stone.
Mm-hmm.
Thick, sturdy layers of sandstone laid almost perfectly flat. And if you read through any of the national park geology pages, they always compare it to like a perfect layer cake. As a great baker, I'm sure you can appreciate even layers.
I am a terrible baker, but thank you. I can appreciate even layers.
Yes, definitely. But over 130,000 square miles of practically perfectly layer cake layers of sedimentary rock. And so that's pretty much what the Colorado Plateau is. And for millions of years, there were no canyons, there were no river systems, no mountains, and it was basically at sea level. Just vast plains extending for miles, gently sloping off into the distance. And then, 70 million years ago, something happened that hadn't happened for many ages. Mountain building. Do you remember back to when we did our Rocky Mountain Fun Facts episode? So, the mountain building event was called the Laramide Orogeny, and that was 70 million years ago.
Okay,
so that's kind of what's happening at this moment. the mountain building event, and something that had been mainly affecting things far to the west in North America had finally come to the Colorado Plateau. At that point in time, 70 million years ago, the Farallon Plate, the tectonic plate, had spent 130 million years being forced underneath North America into the Earth's mantle. We've talked about this in lots of other Fun Facts episodes.
Mm-hmm.
This was happening because the Pacific tectonic plate and the North American tectonic plate were pushing towards each other. Well, when it first started, things were pretty messed up along the coast. Lots of mountains, volcanoes, you name it. But it had been pretty quiet for a while. And then some things that should not have been forgotten were lost. History became legend, legend became myth, and for millions of years, the Farallon Plate passed out of all knowledge.
Why are this is the beginning of Lord of the Rings.
I was wondering if you were going to catch on. That was you got it early.
Yeah, I did.
You nailed that. Oh, I love it. Yes, I'm telling the story of the Colorado Plateau through the Lord of the Rings.
Okay, I like that. I'm here for that.
Until 70 million years ago, when chance came, it attacked a new area, the Four Corners area. But something happened then the Farallon Plate did not expect. The land was far too strong to be crushed under its power, and all the pressure it expended on the Colorado Plateau was transferred further east and further north until it crushed the layers of land beyond, in effect creating the land we now know as the Rocky Mountains, but also illustrating the eastern and northern borders of the Colorado Plateau, since it was mostly left untouched.
That's crazy to me.
Mm-hmm.
That it could have been part of the Rocky Mountains, but the land was so strong that it didn't buckle like everything else.
Nothing. It was just like helped push. I don't know.
Yeah, that's
exactly
crazy.
What happened. So you have this massive tectonic plate being shoved underneath North America, creating tons of pressure from California to Nevada into the Colorado Plateau, and it's affecting everything along the way until finally it gets to the Colorado Plateau and it's just like not budging.
That's crazy.
Yeah. And so then if you look at the map, the Colorado Rockies and the Rockies going north into Wyoming and then further north, it's like all along the border of the Colorado Plateau. Everything else is crumbling but the Colorado Plateau. Continue with our Lord of the Rings introduction.
Okay.
Then, about 20 million years ago, things changed again. The Farallon Plate seemed to be all but spent. There was almost nothing left to push into the center of the Earth, and so the pressure the plate was exerting on North America reversed. North America begins to stretch back out, and the land to the west of the Rocky Mountains started to feel the stress of stretching. But the Colorado Plateau was once more too strong to be affected. Meanwhile, Nevada, parts of California, Arizona, Texas, and even Mexico started to crack and break and stretch, creating a whole new area, the basin and range, which we talked about during the Great Basin episode, stretching Nevada to twice its original width, while also solidifying the western boundary of the Colorado Plateau, because it once again remained unchanged.
That's crazy.
Isn't that nuts?
Yeah, it really is.
This place is just the immovable object.
There's just this giant chunk of land that nothing can do anything to.
Right.
That's so cool.
Yeah. So much tectonic stress going on here, and nothing is changing. Nothing can overpower the Colorado Plateau. And then, the final chapter. Over the last 3 to 6 million years, the tectonic forces did the last thing that they could think of, according to the most current geological theories. And deep in the tunnels under the earth, and in the gloom of Gollum's cave, a fire began to burn, and the heat began to spread all over the region, and the layers of earth that were once at sea level were raised more than 10,000 feet, where the tectonic forces hoped that the strong and sturdy layers of the Colorado Plateau would crack and break. But once again, they were foiled, and the Colorado Plateau remains basically as strong and sturdy and uniform as ever. The immovable object remains undefeated.
So did it raise during that last part, or was everything raising around it? Like, I guess I don't know what elevation.
This is the same as Rocky Mountain National Park.
It's floating.
Basically, yes.
Okay.
And so you have, over the last, 3 to 7 million years, you have this heat from underneath the earth or something along those lines. We called it the force in the Rocky Mountain episode.
It's Star Wars.
Yoda was raising it up. But this time, it's Lord of the Rings. So it's the Balrog underneath the earth with all the heat.
Okay.
So the going theory is that the Farallon plate is like melting or whatever, and there's some heat from underneath this area, and it's causing the mantle to expand underneath the Colorado Plateau and the Rocky Mountains, and that's when the Rocky Mountains were raised so high. The Colorado Plateau has been raised during that same time period. It
just didn't buckle.
It didn't
So it didn't
buckle.
make mountains, but it did raise, this section of land up.
Right.
Okay.
And so to the east, you have the Rocky Mountains, and the mountains are being raised up, and the canyon and the glaciers are carving them all out during the last 6 million years or so. But Colorado Plateau is raising in one giant Lego block, and nothing can change it.
Right.
And so now you have all of these layers that were at sea level raised almost 2 miles into the air.
Okay.
And they're still the same.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's so cool. But that begs the question, because anytime you see any picture of anything from the Colorado Plateau, anytime we travel or anybody else travels to the Colorado Plateau, we're going to places that look like canyonized, broken up shambles of multicolored red rock.
Right.
Right? So that begs the question, how can the Colorado Plateau be the immovable object if every time we go and see it, it looks busted?
Yeah, I would guess that has something to do with that it's sedimentary rock and it's just outward erosion working through layers, but not the actual foundation of the plateau itself.
Yes, exactly. And I think if we gave you a few more minutes to expound your thoughts, I think you'd get exactly where you need to be. Because as massive as Canyonlands National Park is, or Grand Canyon, or the Grand Staircase, Capitol Zion, as massive as these places are, where the landscape is broken up, or you've got a massive canyon in it, they are the exception and not the rule. As hard as it is to believe, they are basically just superficial modifications.
Yeah.
It's kind of like Superman changing his hairstyle.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking about Grand Canyon, obviously, that's a pretty big fissure.
Right, exactly.
But Canyonlands, yes, you get some really cool canyons, but they're not really, really, really deep canyons. And I'm thinking about Capitol Reef and the Water Pocket Fold, where it's an anomaly. But then I'm thinking about the whole area as a whole, because like John said, we have extensively traveled this area.
Right.
We love this area. The Colorado Plateau, we've been there, we've seen that, we've done that. What I'm thinking though is really, as you said, a lot of that land is still flat. Or, you'll see little hills, or you'll see petrified sand dunes, or you'll see stuff there, but it's not like you're driving through and you're just here's something really cool, and here's something really cool, and here's,
right.
As it kind of sounds to say that this area encompasses 9 national parks. It does, but it's huge. There's a lot of nothingness in between these parks.
I think that is a very key point, because as you drive between a lot of these places that we go to, it can be kind of boring.
Yeah, it's repetitive.
Right.
It is.
It's flat. You'll have different colors of flat. But we go and we see the exceptions and not the rule.
Yeah.
And so it's really interesting. Most of the time, we see the tip of the iceberg. Cosmetic changes to the immovable object's very top layers, except for places like Canyonlands or the Grand Canyon, where something very special and unique happened, so that we can venture way deeper into the Colorado Plateau and see what's going on.
Right.
But before we continue on with that, let's get to fun fact number 2 about Canyonlands National Park. Fun fact number 2 is that the current landscape of Canyonlands is actually pretty young. The rocks are old, but the landscape is not. The rocks can be up to 300 million years old, But the landscape that we see in Canyonlands today was only carved out during the last few million years.
Yeah, I mean, that doesn't surprise me because, like I said, I mean, it's not a super, super, super deep canyon.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can tell, like, the rivers are still doing their work. They're still cutting down in there. There's still layers and layers and layers to go.
Right. But the Grand Canyon was kind of cut out during the same time period. So it's not even older than Canyonlands is.
Interesting.
And so that's really interesting.
Yeah.
It's kind of like the curious case of Benjamin Button.
Grand Canyon's going backwards.
Like, well, I've never seen the movie, like Walter Mitty, so I don't know how it works. But, just nestle in here and die. Have you ever seen that movie?
That movie's so good.
It's so good. I feel like every time I look at Canyonlands or one of these beautiful landscapes on the Colorado Plateau, you can't help but not think this is some massive, ancient, unchanging landscape. I mean, how can you not? When you're at Island in the Sky and you're standing at the edge of a cliff at Mesa Arch or Grand Viewpoint or something like that, and you're looking out across this crazy landscape, you can't help but let your imagination tell you that it's ancient. But it's not. It's actually a pretty fresh landscape that's carved out of old stone. Why does that distinction matter? Is it just a technicality? It's still old. What you're missing when you don't recognize that is the rate of change. Because from our human perspectives, it just seems eternal. It's sandstone, and stone is like, it's an object that to humans symbolizes unaltered time or something along those lines. It's something really ancient. But it's hard to wrap our minds around that the landscape we're viewing that's made of stone is actually really fresh. But how and why? If the Colorado Plateau is basically an immovable object, how can it change so quickly? Well, you have to go back to the tectonic forces. If you can imagine the scene from The Lord of the Rings, where it's the first scene where you have all the people in the Fellowship of the Ring together at once, and they're all at Rivendell, and Elrond invited everybody there. And he's got the elves, he's got dwarves, he's got humans and hobbits. They're all there to address the fate of the ring. And Elrond tells everybody how dangerous it is. And Gimli exclaims, "Well, what are we waiting for?" And then he stands up, grabs his axe, and smashes it into the ring, which I was always very impressed with, by the way. Really good aim. But then his axe breaks, and Gimli is blown backwards, and the ring just kind of sits there unchanged. You have to think about the tectonic forces as Elrond. As he says his next line, "The ring cannot be destroyed, Gimli, son of Gloin, by any craft that we here possess." The tectonic forces pushing, pulling, and lifting the Colorado Plateau have no effect. In fact, almost all of the beautiful places that we love in the Colorado Plateau were created unintentionally by the most unlikely of creatures, and as an accident as the tectonic forces raised the land up. Rivers. Water in general, but specifically moving water. This area spent most of its history around sea level or below sea level, having layer upon layer being built up. But as the tectonic forces pushed the land up, it gave the water that fell on the landscape potential energy. And water with energy can do work. And water lifted higher and higher wants to go downhill. And the higher you lift, the more potential energy the water has to do work. And the higher you lift the water, the faster it can move. And the faster water moves, the more stuff it can carry. And slow water can't carry very much, but fast water can. And so as the land got lifted higher and higher, streams and rivers started to appear on the landscape. And as the water worked to find ways to go down, it tore at the landscape, and it made changes to the landscape that hundreds of millions of years of tectonic pressure couldn't even manage. And so as the rivers meandered across the landscape, trying to find out new routes and tearing at the landscape and creating canyons and valleys, eventually it created drainage systems all over the plateau, so that wherever water fell, water would drain into a stream, which drained into a creek, which created a river and canyons, and eventually they all drained into the Colorado River, which make it out to the ocean. So, Canyonlands showcases one of the only forces that has ever had any success breaking up the Colorado Plateau: moving water, which is so interesting. And it's done it in an extraordinarily short amount of time, which is really neat. It took hundreds of millions of years to build all these layers up, and only like 3 to 6 million years for it to carve it all out, to carve it out of stone. Which
and the sandstone's not super strong.
Right.
Which is what makes it interesting, too, that the Colorado Plateau itself can be, because sandstone erodes quite quickly.
Oh, so fast. But it's super strong under stress, but not necessarily so much
when it's moving water.
Yeah. And Canyonlands is the site of one of the great convergences in the Southwest. Deep in Canyonlands is the site where the Green River and the Colorado River meet. Two giants that are responsible for shaping the landscape of the Southwest and the Colorado Plateau.
They are really big rivers by the time they get to that point. So I've never seen the actual confluence.
I know, I can't believe we haven't seen that.
Like, it takes a lot of work to get out there.
Yes, it really does.
So we've never seen it, but I've always wanted to, because these river systems are very big by the time they get down to Canyonlands. Both big rivers.
And when they join forces, it just gets crazy.
And a lot of people don't realize that they're seeing two different rivers when they're up in the island in the sky. When you're up above them, looking down.
Right.
You know, it's like, oh, there's the river. And then, oh, there's the river again. And, you know, you're looking at two different rivers, and then they meet in Canyonlands. Yeah. So it's pretty cool.
It's so cool. The watersheds all converge in this one place, and it's super neat. It's really, really, really unique. But as the rivers carve, they take away a lot of the sediment, leaving the stone basically naked, which is why geologists really love Canyonlands, because they can easily study the Earth's history because it's laid out right in front of them.
Right. And they don't have to dig through all the layers.
Exactly.
The river already did that.
Exactly. Well, fun fact number 3 brings me to one of my favorite things about Canyonlands. The specific layers that are protected and on display in Canyonlands showcase some of the coolest things that anybody can ever find, in my opinion. Dinosaur tracks.
Yeah.
Fun fact number 3 is that Canyonlands National Park protects some of the best preserved swim tracks in the Colorado Plateau.
Really?
Yeah.
And where are these? Because I've never seen them.
Okay, so this is really interesting. So there are a couple of layers specifically that have a lot of dinosaur stuff, a lot of fossil stuff. One is called the Chinle Formation, and the other is the Morrison Formation. If you're from Utah.
And yeah, I mean, you'll find stuff all over Moab and on arches. And I guess we've seen some really cool stuff in that area.
Yes, exactly.
Really cool.
Well, what's really interesting is that some of this knowledge is really new as well. As recently as 2020, a lot of paleontologists and people that study these things had only really discovered like 2 places in Canyonlands that had a lot of dinosaur tracks or something along those lines.
Okay.
But they recently started like it's called the Utah Paleontological Database. And so they've kind of been doing some recanvassing a lot of places, basically, is what they're doing. And over the last couple of years, they went from having 2 places in Canyonlands to more than 70 new sites throughout Canyonlands.
That's so cool.
Yes.
Wait, how do you have swim tracks?
Okay. So remember how we talked about how millions of years were spent basically at sea level, right?
Yeah.
Or slightly underneath a shallow sea or something along those lines. When they're talking about swim tracks, you're not necessarily thinking about fish. You're thinking about creatures that live in the water. They maybe even breathe air.
Yeah, but do they look like footprints, or do they look like flippers hitting up against something or something? Imagine
going to Everglades and having alligators swish their tail or like start swimming at you, right? It's those, you're exactly right. It's like swish marks in the sand.
And they know that those are, wow.
Yes.
That's so cool.
It's super cool. And you can see some of the pictures that they have, because if you don't know what you're looking for, it honestly does just look like a squiggle.
A wave in the rock.
Right.
You could walk right by it.
Oh, yeah, exactly. And a lot of times it's not like a footprint like you would think of it, like looking down at a footprint. A lot of times where they identify these is actually looking up. So they're looking up, and the pressure that the creature's tail or its feet or whatever, when it was flapping or swimming, it created the pressure and it compressed things, and you actually see the bottom outline of these swim tracks kind of poking down at you.
Interesting.
And so it's like having the bottom of a footprint instead of the top of a footprint.
Huh.
And so it's really interesting. And so Canyonlands they've been able to discover lots and lots of these kind of crocodile, alligator looking creatures' footprints and things in a lot of these locations now. And I don't think a lot of them are really accessible to the public.
Yeah, I would imagine not. I'm just trying to think through all the places we've been, and I'm like, I've seen nothing.
Right.
And we've been to more of Canyonlands than most people.
Right.
So
Exactly.
I'm like, maybe they're all in the maze. That's what they're hiding out there. Because the one part we haven't been to.
So a couple of places, all of these layers are...
we saw one.
We did.
At Horseshoe Canyon.
Yes, we did.
I remember that one.
Yes,
Okay.
that was a really cool one.
Sorry, not to cut you off, but I was like, oh, that was a spot. I remember we saw some there.
Yes, and that was an actual footprint that you would like normally imagine with like a 3-toed giant foot.
Yeah.
You're looking down at it. A lot of these, if you want to look for fossils in Canyonlands, you have to look above the white rim.
Okay, and the white rim is if you're at the Island in the Sky district, which is the main district of Canyonlands, and you're looking down one more layer. That's the white rim. And so you're not to the river, you're still above the river, but it's like it's a whitish layer that's below you when you're standing on the Island in the Sky.
Right.
So you'll see it.
Yes.
You kind of got to know what you're looking at again, but the white rim, that's the white rim right there.
And what's really interesting is if you're comparing, so I mentioned 2 formations. One is the Chinle Formation and the other one is the Morrison Formation. And those are separated by so much time. It's kind of crazy. And so you'll have just above the white rim, you'll have the Chinle Formation. So kind of at the bottom of the Island in the Sky district, above the white rim, at the base of some of those really big cliffs.
Okay.
And so that's kind of where you'll find the Chinle Formation. And that's where they're finding a lot of these tracks. But the Morrison Formation, which we'll talk about a little bit more when we get to fun fact number 5, is a lot newer. And what's kind of amazing is, I think when we think about dinosaurs, we kind of think of them as
like all in one block of time.
Right, exactly. Yeah. But dinosaurs changed over a long period of time. And so the dinosaurs that you'll have in the Chinle Formation are completely different and like 100 million years later from what you'll find in the Morrison Formation. It's hard to imagine. It's hard to even comprehend.
I know. That's why I don't think dinosaurs are real.
The tracks are put here by aliens to confuse us.
Yes.
Let's see if we just put some of these around. Let's see what they think it is.
They're going to make up all sorts of stories.
Oh my gosh. So funny. But throughout all of this, I did discover one of the funnest words to say. And it's kind of like from Elf when he says Francisco. Francisco. The word I'm thinking of is phospholiferous.
Oh, that's a hard one.
Yes, because the paleontologists say that the Chinle Formation is the most
phospholiferous.
Yes, the Chinle Formation is the most fossiliferous.
Fossiliferous? Does it meaning there's a lot of fossils there?
Tons of fossils.
Okay. That's a hard word.
Oh my gosh. So yeah, it's a really interesting place, and it's kind of really interesting imagining life, ancient life here in Canyonlands, but also it's almost like if you can put yourself in that mindset, you're thinking, oh my gosh, okay, I'm at sea level, I'm kind of in a swampy little marshy area, and there's alligators all around and they're swimming around.
Yeah.
That's hundreds of millions of years ago.
It doesn't look anything like that now.
Doesn't look anything.
You have to have a really good imagination.
Yes.
Because now all you see is red rocks.
Right.
There's not much else.
Right. But regardless of the situation, to use a Jurassic Park line, life finds a way, And so that brings us into our next portion, which is going from ancient life. Fun fact number 4 is about recent life that you'll find in the park right now.
Okay.
And one of my favorite plants. Do you remember what my favorite wildflower is?
Nope. I actually don't. Oh, paintbrush.
Paintbrush.
Oh, thank you.
There
okay.
you go.
See, we're married. We know each other.
You do love me.
I do.
It's so good. Yours is the avalanche lily.
Yep.
Okay. Whew. Got that. All right.
We can stay married.
Yes.
We'll pass the test.
Well, as I was learning about this, I realized something about my favorite flower that I didn't know before. The desert paintbrush, or any of the paintbrush species, is like half parasite.
Oh, really?
Meaning that its roots will search through the ground and it'll find another plant and it will tap into that other plant's roots and steal nutrients from it.
That's pretty rude, but paintbrush is super pretty.
They're so cool.
And Native Americans have used it for a long, long time for like dyes and stuff. So,
yeah.
And
poisons.
Oh, really?
Yes. I learned that too about my favorite plant is that you can use it for both medicinal purposes and as a poison. Which it's kind of an interesting plant.
It's got
a dark side.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
It's got a serious dark side to it.
How do you poison someone? No, we're not. We won't go into that. Never mind. That sounds risky.
Yes.
I'll look that up on my own time.
Dirt in my shoes taught me how to poison someone.
With paintbrush that you can find all over Canyonlands.
Exactly. But anybody who visits Canyonlands now is going to recognize this is a harsh landscape.
Yeah.
It is a really tricky place to try to survive in. And so you almost can't blame the paintbrush for like figuring out a strategy to survive.
Yeah.
But we talked about in the Arches episode, because a lot of the wildlife is the same between Arches and Canyonlands. In the Arches episode, we talk about one of the most amazing transformations possible.
The frog or the toad, was it?
Yeah, it was an amphibian. I'm not going to spoil it if you want to listen to it.
That was a really cool thing. You should definitely go listen to it.
Yeah.
That was fascinating.
It was so good. But here in Canyonlands, just as in Arches, there are other animals and creatures that have amazing transformations as an adaptation to survive. And so, besides amphibians, you'll have different types of shrimp that live inside the potholes and things like that, which are super duper cool.
Yeah, we've seen there's a hike in the Needles called Pothole Point. Really short.
Yep.
But if you can time it right, which we have, it's hard because it doesn't rain that much.
No, it doesn't.
But if you can time it right and there's water in those potholes, you can see little creatures in there, like little shrimps.
And they have some amazing transformations. Like some of these shrimp mature over the course of like 7 days.
Yeah, because the water dries up so fast. It's like you gotta change now.
It's now or never. The act your age is a really serious. Telling a shrimp to act their age is really important in Canyonlands.
Yeah.
Act like you're 4 days old. Okay, but this brings me to fun fact number 4, which I thought was super duper cool because it's kind of a hero story in a way, like Canyonlands to the rescue.
Okay.
In a lot of ways, because one of the creatures that was really struggling as people settled into the area and as more people were hunting and as cattle grazing and
there's still cattle grazing up there.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. So one of the creatures that was having the hardest time adapting to people living around this area and using the resources was the bighorn sheep. And the bighorn sheep, I mean, they've got if you imagine a large mammal trying to survive off of whatever forage they can find in Canyonlands.
I don't know how they can. I know it really is amazing that there are even mammals that big naturally in that area.
Exactly. I know. It's kind of crazy. And from what I could gather, it seems like as people were moving in and grazing their own cattle and things all around southern Utah, the bighorn sheep in the area were getting diseases. They were getting hunted. A lot of them were dying. And a lot of them were basically extirpated from different areas of southern Utah. Like they were just gone. And the one place where they kind of hung on was Canyonlands National Park.
Probably because there's some of the only things that can live on those cliffs. Because like a cow can't make it down there.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, they'd break their ankles or whatever.
Probably, the bighorn sheep probably were able to find a way to find their own pocket of place to live. I would imagine in Canyonlands with all the cliffs.
Yes. And so, fun fact number 4 is that bighorn sheep from Canyonlands National Park are repopulating the Southwest.
Yes.
And so it's super cool. This was basically one of the only populations left, not only in southern or eastern Utah, but basically in the whole Colorado Plateau. And so I don't know if it was just too harsh of a landscape for other cattle to come and compete with the bighorn sheep or what, but it was like the last identified population in the area. And so a lot of the biologists were like, we got to protect these guys. We got to keep them safe. And I think they got down to as few as like 100 individuals. And as they protected Canyonlands and as they became more aware of it, that population really started to grow. And it's grown to the point, kind of like the buffalo in Yellowstone, where they're like, we've got tons of these guys. Let's export them other places. And that's what they do in Yellowstone with the buffalo. And that's what they're doing with the bighorn sheep here too. So that each district in Canyonlands at this point has its own herd of bighorn sheep.
And I've seen none of them.
Yes.
I don't think I've ever seen a bighorn sheep in Canyonlands.
I know.
We spend extra time there. I just feel like I deserve to see one.
Right. But Canyonlands does have a healthy population, but even still, there's still only like 350 in the park.
I feel like my chances are pretty good.
I know. I hear you. I totally hear you. So for each district to have one, they basically have like 100 individuals or so in each district that you can have a chance of seeing. But that's a healthy enough population for them to like, boom, we're going to repopulate Capitol Reef, or boom, we're going to send some over to Bryce Canyon or Zion, or we're going to send some over to the Grand Canyon. This is the place that is harsh enough for just them to survive. And they're doing so well that they're making it so that the population in the whole area can bounce back. So that now I think there's more than 3,000 individuals that they've helped to repopulate.
Cool.
Which doesn't sound like a whole lot, but if you know what the resources they're surviving off of.
I was going to say, that actually sounds like a lot to me because there's nothing out there. I'm still wondering, what are they eating and where are they finding water? That's pretty surprising.
Yes, exactly. Super cool. And so that's a fun fact because it's like Canyonlands is the hero in the story.
And if you've seen a bighorn sheep in Canyonlands, let us know because we'll have a little chat as to where you found one.
Yes, we do want to have the experience of actually seeing one. That would be great. Which brings us to people. Fun fact number 5. I always love this one because it's so interesting because it relates to us as stewards of the landscape, basically.
Right. Yes.
Now, what I found to be really interesting in the history of Canyonlands is that just as we are complaining now about Canyonlands being an afterthought to arches, that's how Canyonlands was first instituted in the first place. So as much as we like to whine about arches being the one that gets all the attention, if it wasn't for arches, Canyonlands wouldn't be a thing.
And don't get us wrong, we do love arches.
We love arches so much. But
and we also are guilty of going to arches and not going to Canyonlands during the first few times that we traveled to that area.
Oh, yeah. We followed the pattern every other human has followed since time immemorial, basically.
It's like, oh, Canyonlands is right there. I wonder what there is to do there.
Okay, this was kind of a shocking fun fact for me. Fun fact number 5 is that a lot of the infrastructure that was built in Canyonlands National Park was built by the Atomic Energy Commission.
What is that? No, that doesn't sound good.
I know. It's like, wait, what? Say that more time? Yeah. So a lot of the roads down into Canyonlands were built first by the Atomic Energy Commission. So let me explain what that is. So during the 1950s, think after World War II, there was a massive nuclear arms race in the world. And what does a nuclear arms race require? Uranium. Those same layers of sedimentary rock that have lots and lots of fossils also have lots and lots of uranium. During the 1950s, there was this massive uranium boom. So a lot of people came to the area specifically for uranium. And so they were looking for mining opportunities. There was also oil and gas that they were looking for at the same time. And so you had all of these basically prospectors that were combing through the area. And as they were combing through the area, they set up mining claims. And then in order to take advantage of those mining claims, they built the roads necessary to get their equipment in and out. Mm-hmm. And things like the Schaefer Trail, things like the White Rim Road were first built by the Atomic Energy Commission to help facilitate this uranium boom.
That's just crazy. Because I always wondered, like, who in their right mind would build the Schaefer Road? What a dumb place to build a road. Going down the cliffs like that. And, the White Rim Road, too. It's like, I guess if you think about it, it's not just for our entertainment and enjoyment.
Right.
But, I mean, also just thinking about the area as a whole, like how many jeeping roads there are, there's roads everywhere. Mm-hmm. There's routes everywhere.
Yes.
It's pretty crazy, actually, just how many places you can drive a vehicle through the cliffs and the canyons and stuff in the surrounding area.
Well, if you think about it now, too, like you worked in the National Park Service, how hard is it to get approval to build a new road?
Well, and I've never really thought about that because like when we were in the Needles last time, we hiked Chesler Park and the Joint Trail. It's like a 10-mile loop. And even while you're back in there, and it's like you're in the middle of nothing, nowhere, like something happens, you are hours away from any help. Mm-hmm. And I remember looking at the map as we were hiking that, we were taking a break or something, and I was just looking at the map and I was like, there are roads everywhere back here. Not good roads. I mean, they're you have to have a Jeep or high clearance or something to get back in there. And even if you do have the right vehicle, it's gnarly in a lot of places.
Exactly.
But like we had been hiking half the day. We were like way far in there. And then all of a sudden this like big truck full of people comes driving up next to us for their little day hike that they're going to do, and it's like, what? You shouldn't be able to get back here. And I guess I just never thought of how unique that actually is. Mm-hmm. The Canyonlands, there are roads everywhere.
Everywhere.
Yeah.
A lot of those roads were built as a result. Only capitalism could have built those roads.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, there's not enough funds to make it happen.
Oh, yeah. It wouldn't happen now.
Right. Exactly. And so that's not necessarily an endorsement of like building roads everywhere. That's just
no. But they're already there. Is our point. They're already there.
Yes.
And I've never stopped to think about why they are already there.
Exactly. And if it wasn't for the uranium boom coming to an end, we probably wouldn't have Canyonlands National Park.
They would have kept mining it.
They would have kept mining it. Yeah. And yes, they did find some, and there's still some abandoned mining claims in the area. Mm-hmm. And they did this really interesting interview with the first superintendent of Canyonlands National Park. He's called the father of Canyonlands. His name is Bates Wilson. He was actually one of the superintendents of Arches National Park. And he came to Arches with his family. He lived there. He was a superintendent for a while. And he would go on like leisure trips into what is Canyonlands now.
Okay.
And he realized this place is really amazing. But he was kind of during the time when the uranium boom was happening. He was like, there's not a chance, if all of this is going to continue, that we're going to be able to protect this land. Well, as the uranium boom came to a close, he pushed for it before the uranium boom. He realized there was no way it was going to happen during, but then afterwards saw another opportunity and kept pushing for, maybe we should protect what's across the highway here. And but it wasn't until the secretary of the Department of the Interior came to the area, and he was flying over kind of Arches and some of the Southwest, and he was flying around in this airplane, and he was going somewhere, and Bates Wilson was supposed to meet him. I don't remember where he was supposed to meet him, but they were supposed to meet somewhere. And as he was flying, he told the pilot to kind of circle the area, and the area that he was circling was Canyonlands. He's like, what is this place? It looks amazing. And so then when Bates Wilson finally got to the meeting, the secretary of the Department of Interior was like, tell me about this place to the west of Arches.
And he's like, oh, I will.
He had been taking people on what he would call like Dutch oven excursions or something like that, where they would go camping in Canyonlands, what is now Canyonlands. And he's been trying to do this for a year. And finally, I don't know if it was a mistake or just because some guy was like, what is that? As he's flying over, his opportunity came. And finally, the opportunity presented itself, and he took advantage and was like, listen, let's talk about this seriously. And then eventually, it did in fact become Canyonlands National Park. And he originally proposed a 1 million acre preserve, but it got cut way down for the initial time when it became a national park. But then later on, they've been adding more and more land to it as they realize this place is awesome.
That's cool.
But it has a really unique origin story, human history-wise, that I don't think any other national park could ever claim, that nuclear energy built all the roads.
Right.
Which I thought is so funny.
And there's not that many roads that you as a first-time visitor can drive on.
Right. Exactly.
So that's what's kind of funny about it is, there are a lot of roads, but there's only so much pavement.
Right. Exactly. And after it became a national park, like there were proposals, let's start paving the White Rim Road, or let's make it more accessible so that it would be like a Yellowstone loop, where people can drive on a paved road in their regular town car wherever they want. But it just never happened, which a lot of people that Jeep are probably really grateful for. And so the ruggedness that was preserved, but still making the land very accessible, is kind of unique.
Well, and I would say that's what characterizes Canyonlands for me, is the ruggedness of it.
Right.
And just how wild and remote it feels. And so that's why, yes, we do love Arches. We love Arches so much. And it really is just like right across the highway from Canyonlands. So you got to do both. But Arches is more of your stick to the pavement, and here's all the places you go, and everybody goes to the same places.
It's a very specific focus. We're there for the Arches, hence the name.
Yeah, and so when you get into Canyonlands, you see the vastness of it everywhere you turn.
Right.
It's massive, and you can feel that. And then you get in there, and you're like, well, I can hardly see any of it. There's this one road that takes me, the island in the sky has the one main road that takes you kind of the very end of the mesa top. And then a little short road that branches off of that. And that's the pavement.
Right.
And then you get into the Needles. Like I was writing the Canyonlands Itinerary, and I'm like, half of these things in the Needles that you should go see are down dirt roads. They're like, there's so little pavement in that section of the park too. And so for me, though, that is what makes it totally different than Arches. Like the feeling is just different.
Yeah.
It's like you get out there and you're like, whoa, like I'm a tiny speck.
Yes.
And I love that feeling.
It's a huge, massive, vast landscape. You're exactly right. You're a tiny speck in it. And the rugged character is just, it's so different from across the highway.
Well, and it's so different from Bryce Canyon and Zion as well. That's why it's worth your time, because it's like you get into Canyonlands and it's like, it doesn't matter how many of the other Utah parks you've been to, it's not the same.
Right.
And it feels totally different.
Yes.
You'll just feel different when you're there because you're like, oh, this is barely, like, I'm barely scratching the surface. I think that's why I love Capitol Reef as well. And Capitol Reef is a lot kind of that same way too. Where it's just like, so we as a couple really enjoy those places where it's like the wildness of the place has been preserved a little bit better. And it just feels more adventurous and it feels more like I could die out here.
Right.
And that's kind of a fun feeling to have. It's not something you get in some of these other national parks.
Yeah, it's true.
And it's nice to experience both sometimes.
And in both of our favorite parks, Capitol Reef and Canyonlands, it feels like as many times as we've been back, I've still only scratched the surface.
Yeah.
Kind of reminds me of our fun facts from today, you know, talking about the Colorado Plateau and how even the massive amount of erosion that you can witness in these parks is still only the tip of the iceberg for the Colorado Plateau. And the amount of adventure that you can have, you'll almost always, throughout your whole life, only be able to say that you've scratched the surface.
Yeah.
At Canyonlands.
Yeah. I mean, we've seen a lot of it, and it's still like we haven't even touched an entire section.
Yeah.
Or the rivers. Like, and we still have more to do in the other two that we've already been to. And, you know, it's a really cool feeling. And so that's why we say, you know, Canyonlands really for us is equal to Arches as far as you need to give time to both because they're totally different. It's a totally different experience.
Yes.
Between the two. And so if you are looking for a little bit more rugged, little bit more adventurous type feeling, then Canyonlands is your place. Because it's like when we're hiking in Canyonlands, like when we're down in the Needles, I'm like, kids, do not touch the cairns. Like, do not touch them. Because if you knock one down, that could mean that somebody behind us gets lost and dies.
Right. They
have to be able to see that cairn to navigate, which is totally different than Arches where you're like, we'll just follow the crowds of people and make it back to our car.
Hard to get lost when we're just in line to see the delicate arch.
Yeah. And you need both. They're both really cool. But that to me is the magic of Canyonlands. It's like the level of adventure and how small you feel and how vast the landscape is in front of you is something you don't get every day. And that's what makes Canyonlands so cool.
So for the task today, I have something a little bit different that I'd like to invite people to do. I want you to open up whatever map service you use, Google Maps or Apple Maps or whatever it is, and turn on the satellite view and look at Canyonlands National Park. And sometimes you can even turn it into like the 3D map and it's a little bit more interactive and things. But I just want you to look at the map and see how crazy the landscape looks from the sky. It's absolutely insane.
I'm going to go do that right now. John says it looks cool, but I haven't actually done that. So I'm going to go take a look too. And I just really hope that you have a new appreciation for Canyonlands National Park, that you feel like it's somewhere that you want to add to your itinerary. We, speaking of itineraries, just released the Canyonlands Itinerary a couple of weeks ago. It's one of my brand new ones. My itineraries just get better and better. Like every time I release a new one, I'm like, man, this is a great itinerary. And that's how Canyonlands is. It's just a way to help you better appreciate what you're seeing and to really experience the sections of Canyonlands in a really cool way. So go to dirtandmyshoes.com, go click over to the Canyonlands Itinerary. You can get both. I have Arches there too. So if you're going to this area, let us help you plan the trip because we are just so excited to share it with you. And we hope that you're able to get some dirt in your shoes.